does it look like to give your entire life to the Great Commission? In this powerful episode of the Evangelism Podcast, we sit down with Bishop Daniel, a global Christian leader whose heart beats for the unreached and the forgotten. As president of GFA World, Bishop Daniel serves as a vital bridge between thousands of frontline missionaries across Africa and Asia and the global church. Raised in a family devoted to world missions, his life has been marked by compassion, sacrifice, and an unwavering call to bring the living water of Jesus to the most desperate places on earth. His story will stir your faith, awaken your compassion, and challenge you to live fully surrendered to God's global harvest.
Jesus said, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel."
Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved.
Welcome to the Evangelism Podcast with Dr. Daniel King, where Daniel interviews full-time evangelists, pastors, missionaries, and normal everyday Christians to discover how they share their faith, their powerful testimonies, and amazing stories that will inspire you to reach people with the good news. And now, here's your host, missionary and evangelist, Daniel King.
Welcome to the Evangelism Podcast. I'm Daniel King. I'm excited about telling people about Jesus. Today I have a very special guest with me, Bishop Daniel from Gospel for Asia. Thank you, sir, for being on the Evangelism Podcast.
No, it's my privilege. Thanks for having me.
Gospel for Asia is one of the largest missions organizations in the world. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do and what drives your organization?
Yeah, the original name of the organization is Gospel for Asia and transitioned now to GFA World because we moved out of Asia into expanding into Africa. So we're still in Asia, but it was kind of a funny thing. We realized, our name doesn't work anymore because the work is getting bigger. So GFA World's history is really interesting. So both my parents were involved in missions. My dad from the age of 16. That's an incredible story that people can read in his book, Revolution World Missions. My mom actually comes from Germany, from a small village, and she also was involved in missions from a very young age. And after both my parents had spent many, many years on the mission field, practically with teams. I mean, sometimes their teams were beaten. They were chased out of places. Really difficult hands-on experience. God led them to be able to begin what is now, GFA World. But the way they began is they didn't know exactly what God would want them to do. They knew missions, they knew national missions. And so what they did is they called their friends together every Tuesday and said, can we gather in our living room and pray? So they would put the maps of different countries out, the world maps and maps of Nepal, India, and Africa, and different places, and they would just begin to pray. They literally took serious what Jesus said: pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out more laborers. And from that small Tuesday night prayer meeting, missions prayer meeting, GFA World really has expanded into four major areas. One is sending out national missionaries into places that are really difficult and complicated. Second is assisting children to have a future, especially through education. At the height of our child sponsorship program, we were helping over 80,000 kids to be able to have a future. The third is transforming communities through Christ's love. And this happens through literacy, water, and everything else. But what we want to see is entire communities spiritually and physically uplifted, a church established, so that people are established in the faith. And then fourth is disaster relief, kind of like what we were doing recently in Sri Lanka with the flooding that took place. And so, from these kind of focuses that we've seen, literally millions and millions of people's lives have been changed. We've seen tens of thousands of water projects put in, tens of thousands of people's lives being transformed, churches established. The goal for us, in the passion that drives us, it sounds kind of funny, but it's two things. One is to know Christ, and second is to make him known. And my dad, he went to be with the Lord just about a year and a half ago. he would emphasize over and over, even though we are one of the largest missions organizations in the entire world, when the history is written about church planting and church history and missions, I mean, GFA World will be prominent in that. And yet, he said, our greatest concern is not necessarily just missions, but it's knowing Christ. He said, end of the day, we stand before God and we stand before God alone. And the only question is, did you know me? And so he would talk to our staff and he's like, look, what's more important than the work that we do is do we know Christ? Are we knowing God more and more? And so he would constantly emphasize that. And I believe that is one of the unique things about GFA World. While we're so focused on missions and national missions and reaching the most unreached, what's behind that, what drives us is our love for God. I mean, Jesus said this in Matthew's gospel, but John 14:15, if you love me, you will obey me. If you obey me, you abide in me. And if you abide in me, your life bears fruits. The Father's will that you don't just bear fruit, but good fruit, lasting fruit, and much fruit. And so the driving point behind GFA World is a call to know God more and more. And from that love and passion, we want others to know him also. And I think that's the passion that runs through all of our staff everywhere, whether it's here or in Canada or, in Australia, New Zealand, everywhere else. And that's been there for the last 45 years. It's never been an emphasis on just we need to do more work and more missions, but we need to love God more and more. That small prayer meeting that my parents had on Tuesday, over 45 years ago, we still continue that all around the world. So we still have every week Tuesday prayer, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. We gather all the community together. We put the maps out. We have different prayer requests and stories from the mission field. And then the first Friday of each month, we have all night prayer. So it goes from like 7 o'clock in the evening till about 1 o'clock in the morning. We have our watch night prayer, praying for the world, kind of entering into the same thing that Christ said, pray with me. Can you pray with me through the night? And so we take it serious, and we have seen God answer prayers and do incredible, incredible things on the mission field.
I really love that you are second generation in ministry. My parents were also missionaries, and a lot of my passion for following Jesus comes from their example and their prayers over the years. And I'm sure it's the same in your case. What were some of the things that you learned from your father? And then what is it like now to step into his shoes and to follow him? It can't be easy to follow a great man of God like your father.
Yeah. I almost laugh that both of us have a similar experience in terms of, my dad was a pastor and a missions leader. And I don't know if your dad was a pastor, but, being a PK is bad enough. And then being a PK MK is like, double whammy. But, I think growing up on the mission field, like I grew up on the mission field, I grew up here too. So I had this like weird East-West experience, and I'm so grateful for that. I can see the good and the bad, both in the East and the West, and I can see things more objectively. And I think that's something that God has really used now in my leadership, taking responsibility as the president of GFA World. But what I've seen is that my dad and my mom, ministry and missions was not something that they did, but it was who they were. It was who they were. It wasn't something that was just their job or just a calling that they had upon their life, but they lived and breathed that. I mean, my dad would talk in his sleep sometimes. My mom would tell us, and he would be either sharing the gospel in his sleep or preaching to someone or talking to someone on the mission field. I mean, it was just constantly what was on his mind, and it was something that God did, for him when he was a very young person. When my dad was 16, there was a missions team that came to his village. Now, my dad's village in South India is the same village that St. Thomas came to in AD 52. So AD 52, I mean, this is just 20 something years after Christ's resurrection. St. Thomas, doubting Thomas, hey, Thomas, put your hands here and on my side. that same St. Thomas came to India and brought the faith. So my dad's village, you can still go visit some of the churches where St. Thomas established the faith. I mean, the original building is not there, but the place is there.
I've been there actually. I
Yeah.
think where they say that he was martyred.
Yeah.
So they stabbed him to death with spears.
Yeah. So he came to Kerala, where my dad was born, and established the churches along the coast, and went to Chennai, where you got to visit, and he was speared to death. Interesting, Christ was speared on the cross, and St. Thomas got to be speared on, also in the same way. But the interesting thing is my dad in his village had 2,000 years of Christian history. I mean, this is like some of the oldest Christian faith history in the entire world. I think St. Mark in Egypt might be the one that's close to that. And so my dad had never heard that there were people in his own country that had never heard about Christ. Because, I mean, you got like 2,000 years of Christian history in his village. And so there was this missionary team that came to my dad's village to challenge young people to surrender their life for full-time ministry. My dad was too shy, so he climbed a tree that hung over the river, and he listened to these missionaries challenging young people and challenging people to go to parts of the country that had never heard about Christ. And there on top of that tree, my dad prayed and said, God, I don't have any gifts. I don't have any talents. If you want my life, you can have it. And my dad surrendered his life to God from the age of 16. And he ended up joining a missions team and spending the next 8 years doing missions in some of these areas. But myself, I have been to places up in North or in these other countries, and you go and ask some of these people, do you know Christ? And the response will be something like this. I lived here my whole life. My friends are here. My family's here. Your friend Jesus is not here. Check the next village down this road and you might find your friend Jesus. I remember traveling in the vehicle with my dad one day. We were up in North India somewhere. I don't remember which state. And it was Christmas Day. I don't know where we were going. I was little. But I remember my dad saw a farmer plowing the field, the oxen, wooden plow, classic, plowing the field. And my dad got out of the vehicle, talked to the farmer and said, why are you working on Christmas? And the man responded and said, what's a Christmas? I mean, the guy literally had no idea who Jesus is, has no idea what Christmas is all about. And these experiences really impacted my life, impacted my dad's life, that there's a world out there that is still waiting to hear about Christ for the very first time. And we should never be ungrateful for the privilege that we have. I mean, I'm in Texas, you're in Oklahoma. We're kind of almost in the buckle of the Bible Belt. I mean, we're just like there. You can go to Walmart and you can buy a Bible. The irony is the Bible's printed in China. I mean, we're smuggling Bibles into China. They're printing them for us. You can go to In-N-Out Burger and there's Bible verses on the bottom of the cup. You can turn on the radio and there's Christian radio stations from one extreme to the other extreme. You can drive down the street and you can walk into a church, like all kinds of churches. I've seen intersections with 4 churches on 4 corners. I mean, it's amazing. It's crazy. It's so hard not to hear the gospel in some way here. And I know it does happen. I've met people in America that have never heard the gospel and don't know Christ. I know that. But when you talk about millions and millions and millions of people in some of these nations in Africa and India and in South Asia that are still waiting to hear about Christ for the very first time. I mean, this is what drove my parents. This is what drives me. This is what drives, GFA World. And I grew up in that environment, living on the mission field, being in the villages, seeing the reality of the missionaries going door to door, praying for the sick, giving out gospel tracts, and sharing about Christ very simply. And people's hearts are just so ready and open for what God has done for them. This is what drives me. This is what drove the passion for my dad. And I'm so grateful that I got to walk with my dad all these years and got to experience what does it mean to see servant leadership take place. So now when I'm, now taking responsibility for the ministry, I'm able to look back on those experiences with that same heart and passion and be so grateful that was instilled in me. And my joy and my hope is this, that I can instill that same passion, in other people. And, I would encourage people, we were talking about my dad's book earlier, but, Revolution World Missions, I would encourage everyone to get a copy of this. It will ruin your life if you read this book. The funny thing about this book is my dad wrote this book talking about national missions, missionaries from their own country and own language. But I know so many people that have picked up this book and read it, and they went as missionaries. And they're like, God used this book to call me. And I'm like, I'm so grateful for that. If people want to get a copy of that, if they go to bishopdaniel.org, you can hit the link and you get a free copy of this book. But I would encourage everyone to read this book. And the reason is, if my dad was here and he was talking about missions, and he would say, the starting point for all of us is this: pray that God would fill our heart with compassion. It's not just knowing mission stats or what the greatest needs are in the world, or World ABC, or the 1040 window, or all these things. He would say, look, when Christ saw the crowds, he was moved with compassion. And unless our hearts break with the things that break God's heart, it doesn't matter how many missionary stories or what we see on TV and this famine and that war, our hearts will not be moved unless our hearts are filled with compassion. So really the starting point is, God, would you break my heart with the things that break your heart? My dad faced a crisis in his life when he first came to America. He was studying in Bible college, and he slowly kind of got stuck into, wanting to live out the American dream. And, it ended up being materialism almost killed my dad. Wanting to be like the Joneses and wanting to be like your neighbors. And yet he was starting the ministry, he was pastoring, he was going to Bible college, and he found that his heart was becoming more and more cold. Materialism was killing him. And my mom had been praying for him for a couple of years, just quietly asking God to do a work on my dad's heart. And one day he borrowed a prayer, and God broke his heart. He borrowed a prayer and said, Lord, take eternity. God, take eternity and stamp it on my eyes. Take eternity, stamp it on my eyes. Break my heart with the things that break your heart. And from that point on, he was never the same. My parents sold everything, gave away everything. They began to support missionaries that they knew on the mission field. But it seems like when we talk about missions, people either intellectually take the information, but their hearts are not broken for it. And so the starting point really is, every church should be praying, God, break our hearts for what's happening around the world. Every family should be praying, God, would you break our hearts? And my dad would say this, practically, get a world map. People don't have world maps, they can write to me, I'll send them a world map. Get a world map, stick it somewhere in your house, like that you can see it. And when you see on the news that there's this war, or there's this famine, or there's this problem happening, get the family together, go find that country on the map, and just take a few moments, just a minute, and just pray, God, would you pour out your mercy on this country? Would you send more missionaries? When we talk about, like Afghanistan, where there's hardly any Christians there, or some of these nations, or Somalia, or North Korea, I mean, we should be desperately praying. I would challenge every church in America every Sunday to take 2 minutes out of their service. 2 minutes. I mean, that's like really short. 2 minutes out of the service and highlight some country and pray for more missionaries to go through that. If people want a resource, get Operation World. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. There's a big fat book. There's also an app that goes through every country of the world. It has prayer requests. Our churches need to be missions minded. But how do we do that? Bring the needs of the world in front of our congregation. I promise you, as people begin to pray for missions and pray for the needs of the world and give towards missions, those churches will be blessed. I've seen it happen. Churches that get involved in missions, they see the giving go up. People's hearts are softer. People are doing incredible things. And I've seen my own friends who stopped giving towards missions, and they started using the word missional. We're doing more missional things around our church, which means we're not doing missions anymore. We're doing nice things to keep the money close. Their churches started dying, and it shrinks, and we become more self-centered. Missions is one of the only things that gets our eyes off of ourselves and fixes it on the world out there. And this is what Jesus said to the disciples in John's Gospel, chapter 4. You remember Jesus was talking to the Samaritan woman, that whole conversation. She goes back to the village and says, I found the Messiah. The disciples come back and brought food, and they're like, Jesus, please eat. And Jesus says, I have food to eat that you do not know. And they're like, okay, this doesn't make sense. We went to the village to buy you food, and now you're saying that you have food to eat. And in that culture, still in the East, unless Jesus eats first, the disciples can't eat. So they're hungry. Jesus is saying he already ate. I mean, it's kind of a big dilemma. And then Jesus says, you say it's still 4 months and then comes the harvest. I say to you now, lift up your eyes and see the harvest is ready to be brought in. What Jesus was telling them and telling us and telling me is this: lift up our eyes off of our small, petty concerns and our small little life, what we think is so important. Lift our eyes above that and see that there's an entire world out there waiting for the gospel. And then the question is, what are we going to do about it? Like, it's not enough just to know, but we have to be concerned. And so lifting up our eyes off of our own selves, our own plans, our own concerns, our own worries, and realizing that the privilege that we have to know Christ is a great privilege that half the world wishes that they would know. And this has been the heart of GFA World. This has been the heart of the missionaries, the heart of my dad. And I know it's your heart also. And one day we will stand before the Lord. And in this very short life, all that matters is, did we know Christ, and did we live our life in a way that made him known to the rest of the world? That's it. We're not taking anything with us. I mean, my dad went to be the Lord a year and a half ago, and he didn't take his car, he didn't take his house, he didn't take anything.
But he took millions of souls with him.
Yeah.
Because the only thing you can take into eternity is other people. And absolutely. I so love hearing your heart cry, your passion for the lost. I think that is the heart of God for the world to be saved. Let's talk a little bit about strategy for world missions. Your father wrote the book, A Revolution in World Missions, and really I think the revolution he is talking about is empowering national leaders to go and to preach the gospel. And talk to me a little bit about that strategy and why it has been able to produce such great fruit in the ministry that you and your father have led.
Yeah. I think my father was very, very aware that throughout history from the very beginning, I mean, after the resurrection, the gospel has gone forth proclaiming about Christ and the resurrection, victory over sin, Satan, and death had gone all around the world. But the challenge of taking that good news is a continuous effort, no matter what happens. And as countries begin to close, and this is what happened, especially in my dad's book, Revolutionary Missions, and he kind of highlights it. When you look at the 1040 window, and for people that maybe don't know what the 1040 window is, if you take a map and you look at the latitude lines, that go across, there's like 10 and there's like 40. Of course, zero's in the middle somewhere there. It kind of creates this rectangular block from like North Africa all the way to Japan, up into Russia, parts of Russia, down past India into Sri Lanka. And what it's doing, it's highlighting some of the most unreached places on earth, and most people groups are there. The least amount of missions resources go there. I mean, we spend more on dog food than we do on missions. If 1% of our Christmas giving was given towards missions, I mean, it would like overwhelm everything. We could give a Bible to every person on earth if even a small percentage of our Christmas giving was given. Nothing wrong with Christmas, nothing wrong with dogs and kitties and dog food. That's not the point. The point is we just don't know. We really just don't even are aware of this. And so after World War II, about 80% of those nations within the 1040 window were restricted or closed for outsiders, or it became very, very difficult. My dad was not saying that people should not go as missionaries if God calls them, but my dad was saying, let's switch the question. Let's ask the right question. What's the best way for those people in those nations to hear the gospel? I mean, if it's sending hot air balloons over into North Korea, with gospel tracts, fine. If it's doing that, if it's strapping a Bible onto a chicken and having it cross the border, fine. Whatever, whatever that is. If it's radio, if it's podcast, if it's smuggling, it doesn't matter. The right question will give you the right answer. And the right question was, what's the best way for many of these people in these restricted areas to hear the gospel? And the natural answer was national missionaries. Missionaries, people from their own country who know the language, who already know the culture, who live at the level of the people, who are accepted already, who know the mannerisms, and all they need is a little bit of support, and they need our prayers to send them. These people can reach their own people with the gospel in a greater and faster way. And from a business point, which is not what I like to talk about, from a business point, the ROI is so much greater. When you have someone who know the language and they live at the level of the people, and this is what Amy Carmichael and even like Hudson Taylor and others said. They actually said in their writings, unless the nationals take ownership, the ministry efforts will die. Like someone has to continue it. They have to own it. We don't want to just hand out fish. We want to teach people how to fish and let them fish. And so what we've seen is through national missions, we've seen incredible things happen. I mean, I'll give you a funny story. One of our missionaries is going door to door, knock, as normal. They knock on the doors like, hey, have you heard about Christ? Or here's a gospel tract. Is there anyone I can pray for? And the family was like, yeah, there's someone sick in our family. Can you please pray? And so our missionary said, sure, I'll be happy to pray. It happens all the time. And so they led the missionary through the house. In the back side of the house, there was a sick water buffalo. And they're like, can you pray for our water buffalo? And I mean, you know this and I know this. They milk the buffalo, sell the milk, and that's money for food. So sick buffalo means no food. That's basically what it means. So our missionary laid his hands on this water buffalo and said, God, if there's ever a time to do something, this is the time to do something. And God healed that water buffalo. That sinky water buffalo got healed. And the whole family, they said, we want to commit our lives to God. The neighbors heard about it because, neighbors are right there. They're like, we want to know about this Jesus. So many people in that village gave their lives to Christ that a church was established in the village because of this stinky water buffalo. In another place, there was one of our missionaries, our national missionaries, who was sharing about Christ, and a little crowd had gathered. He's giving out gospel tracts and sharing about Christ, and a little boy was listening to this missionary talk about the stories of Christ healing the blind man or the lame man. And so after everyone was gone, he said, could you please pray for my father? My father's not well. So the little boy led our missionary outside the village. There was his father tied to a tree. He was demon possessed and so wild, just like what you read in the Bible, he's so wild and uncontainable. And he said, could you please pray for my father? He's not well. And so our missionary prayed for his father, explained the gospel, and God set him free. Now, think about this. Now, the boy and his father in his right mind and the missionary come walking back into the village. What do you think everyone wants to know? That's the crazy guy for years that was tied up outside the village. So many people gave their heart to Christ because of this one small little miracle. There's an extreme story that I've only heard about this a few times in my life. It's actually happened in one of the places on the mission field where one of our missionaries was walking along a sacred water source where people would dip themselves for forgiveness of sins. And there was this woman weeping uncontrollably. And especially in some of these Middle Eastern, Asian, African cultures, when you see someone publicly crying out loud, it means something really bad has happened. So our missionary went and asked, is everything okay? And she said, my sins are so many. My husband is sick. My kids are sick. I don't know what to do. to find forgiveness of sins and to find the answer to all these problems. I've given the best gift and offering I know what to do. I've taken my 3-month-old baby boy and threw him into the water as a sacrifice. And she went crying and weeping. And my dad got this letter. He's reading this letter from this missionary of his experience. And my dad is on the floor on his knees weeping while he's reading his letter. And the missionary explained to this woman that, Christ went to the cross and, he can forgive your sins and he gives you life and he conquered sin, Satan, and death. And in the letter, the missionary said she wiped her eyes and looked into my eyes and said, "Where were you half an hour ago? Where were you?" She said, "It's too late. It's too late." And she went back crying, weeping. And my dad was weeping at that time. And that's an extreme story, but those words of "where were you? Why did it take you so long to get here?" This is what drives our national missionaries. They love their people so much. They have a passion for their own people. And they desperately want their people to know about Christ. And for us, our passion that drives us, my dad would always say, he would quote that scripture, "Work while it's day, because night is coming when no man can work." Many of these nations within the 1040 window in Africa and other places, the doors are slowly closing. Persecution is up. I mean, I just was talking to our missions leaders on the field, and several of our people were put in prison just last week. Others were spent Christmas in prison. It's becoming more and more common that the missionaries are getting beaten, they're being imprisoned. But the courage that they have and the love that they have for their own people drives them. And what we've seen is these national missionaries, all they need is a little bit of support. It takes like $45 a month to help support a national missionary, but to be able to support a national missionary and then to back them with prayer, this is one of the greatest opportunities. In a little letter of 3rd John, which is basically a postcard, John writes his postcard to Gaius, and he says, it's an interesting verse in there. He says, if you help the traveling missionaries along the way, you become part of their ministry. You become part of their work. People don't realize that many, many nations on earth are closed for outsiders, or we may not have the ability because of where we are or the responsibilities that we have, that we may not be able to just pick up and go to some other country. But when we pray, when we support, when we link our arms with those who are doing missions, we become part of their life. We become part of their missions outreach. And so the churches that are being planted, the gospel tracts that are being given, the widows that are being reached, the lepers that are being cleaned, the children that are being helped, the street people that are being covered with blankets in the middle of winter, we in effect are joining with those missionaries who are doing that. And this is the power of national missions, is they are going to places that we would never be able to go or effectively go. And yet we get to involve our life in missions, fulfilling the Great Commission. The Great Commission is not just for missionaries and for weird pastors. It's for all of us, And yet we get to do that through our prayers and our support. And I believe that GFA World has become one of the greatest bridges to link the church in the West with the church in the East, to see missions fulfilled. So we have no excuse now. we literally have no excuse. All of us can participate in missions, and all of us can at least pray. And I would challenge every church in America, take 2 minutes out of the service every Sunday and pray for missions. I would challenge every family, pray for our children, that God would use them in some way in missions, whether they go or they do something with their life. I would challenge every family, take time out of the month to maybe fast and pray as a family for missions. I know some families, they do this. They go one time less out to eat, and they use those resources for missions. I know some families, they'll take a meal a week and just have like rice and beans, and they'll use those resources that they normally would have spent to buy gospel tracts or to support missionaries. I know families that during Christmas, they draw names. So everyone gets a present, but then they use some of the resources that would have been spent for Christmas to support national missionaries or to buy gifts for someone else across the world. And so it's very simple. I mean, it could be as simple as, twice a week I make my coffee at home rather than going to Starbucks. People don't realize 10 cents can mean 100 gospel tracts. And the average gospel tract is read by 10 people. I mean, I give out gospel tracts to people in the mission field who can't read and write because I know they'll find someone to read to them. It's amazing. But the power of national missions is something that God has gifted to us. It's there in the book of Acts. It's there in the scriptures, but it's alive and well today. And GFA World has become one of the greatest bridges to see how our life, our prayers can have effect all around the world in Africa and Asia.
Well, thank you so much for what you do. It's so valuable and needed in the harvest fields of the world. If someone wants to support the ministry that you're involved in or find out more information about you, what is a good website that they can go to connect with you?
Yeah, the best link that people can go to is go to bishopdaniel.org, and it has multiple links in there to getting the Revolution World Missions book for free, learning about supporting national missionaries, or links to stories to learn more about the ministry, or even how to pray better. So bishopdaniel.org is a great resource to share with your friends or others or even churches.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Evangelism Podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really appreciate it.
Do you ever find it hard to share your faith? What if telling someone about Jesus was as simple as drawing a picture on a napkin? In his latest book, The Gospel in Pictures, Communicating Eternal Truth Visually by evangelist Daniel King, you'll discover simple and creative ways to explain the plan of salvation, anytime, anywhere. This powerful book will teach you how to be bold in sharing your faith, clearly communicate the basic gospel message, and remembering the plan of salvation. Imagine sitting in a coffee shop. Someone asks, "What must I do to be saved?" With just a pen and a napkin, you'll be able to draw the way to eternal life in a way they'll never forget. If you want to be an effective witness for Jesus and confidently lead others to salvation, this is the book for you. To get your copy of The Gospel in Pictures, go to kingministries.com. Also available on Amazon.
For more information about how to share your faith or to financially support our worldwide evangelistic outreaches, visit kingministries.com. Again, that's kingministries.com.